Commander Jiho couldn't believe what he was seeing on his screen. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the display, hoping the readings would change. They didn't. For 3 decades, he had explored the furthest reaches of space for the Galactic Council, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The ship floating before them was enormous, easily 3 times larger than their biggest dreadnought. But size wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was the way space itself seemed to bend around the vessel, creating ripples in reality that made his eyes water when he looked directly at it. The hull gleamed with an unusual metal that shifted colors as their scanners swept across it, almost as if it were alive. "Lieutenant Vexra, run those scans again," Jiho commanded, his voice betraying none of the anxiety churning in his stomach. The young officer's tentacles moved rapidly across her console, her usually calm demeanor cracking slightly. "Sir, I've run the diagnostics 4 times. The energy signature is beyond our measurement capabilities. Whatever's keeping that ship locked in time, it's using more power than our entire fleet generates in a year." She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "And sir, there are life signs aboard. Thousands of them." Jiho's mandibles clicked together, a nervous habit he'd developed during his first combat mission 40 years ago. In all his years exploring dead worlds and ancient ruins, he'd never found anything that suggested such advanced technology existed. The galaxy had 3 major powers, dozens of smaller civilizations, and countless primitive species. But this ship belonged to none of them. The vessel's design was unlike anything in their databases. Where most ships were built for function over form, this one seemed crafted by artists who understood war. Weapon ports were seamlessly integrated into the hull, creating elegant curves that somehow made the ship look both beautiful and terrifying. Strange symbols were etched along its sides, glowing faintly with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Captain, we're detecting some kind of scanning beam from the unknown vessel," reported his communications officer. It's learning our language." The quantum field around the ship just fluctuated. Jiho felt ice form in his veins. Whatever was inside that ship was waking up. After who knows how long floating in this quantum prison, something was stirring. He thought about the peaceful trade routes that ran through this sector, the colonies. That depended on those routes for supplies, the billions of innocent lives that could be affected if this turned out to be hostile. "All ships, maintain defensive positions but do not power weapons," he ordered. "Send an encrypted message to Council Command, Priority Alpha. Tell them we've found something that could change everything." He stared at the mysterious vessel, watching as more lights began to flicker along its hull. "And tell them we might have just woken up something that was better left sleeping." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of their engines and the nervous breathing of his crew. Whatever happened next, Jiho knew that this moment would be remembered as the day the galaxy discovered it wasn't alone in the universe. Something, far more advanced than anything they'd imagined, was out there, and it was about to wake up. Dr. Hana gripped the shuttle's safety rail as they approached the mysterious ship. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and she could see her own nervous excitement reflected in the faces of her 5-person boarding team. As the galaxy's leading expert on ancient technologies, she had dreamed of a discovery like this her entire career. But dreams and reality were proving to be very different things. The moment their shuttle touched the quantum field surrounding the massive vessel, everything changed. The air inside their small craft seemed to thicken, and Hana felt a strange, tingling sensation across her skin. Through the viewport, she watched space itself twist and bend around them, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Her equipment readings went completely wild, showing energy levels that shouldn't be possible. "Stay calm, everyone," she whispered to her team, though her own voice was shaking. "We're making history here." The instant their shuttle made contact with the alien hull, the dead ship exploded into life. Lights raced along corridors that had been dark for who knows how long. The sound of massive systems powering up echoed through the metal walls, creating a deep humming that they could feel in their bones. It was like watching a sleeping giant wake up from a 1,000-year dream. Hana's translator device began working frantically as symbols appeared on screens throughout the ship. The writing looked nothing like any language in their databases, flowing, across displays in patterns that seemed almost alive. Then, slowly, the symbols began changing, shifting through dozens of different languages that Hannah recognized from her studies of dead civilizations. Finally, the symbols settled into something she could read. Galactic Standard, but written in a style that felt both ancient and somehow more elegant than the modern version. Before she could process what this meant, a voice filled the air around them. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves." The voice was calm, measured, and spoke with an accent that Hannah had never heard before. There was something almost musical about the way it pronounced each word, as if the speaker came from a culture that valued the sound of language as much as its meaning. But what really caught her attention was how the voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if the ship itself was speaking. "This is Aegis, shipboard AI of the UES Day 1. Temporal displacement detected. Initiating crew revival protocols." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. An artificial intelligence that had been active for who knows how long, maintaining a ship in perfect condition while its crew slept. The technology required for such a feat was beyond anything their civilization possessed. But more importantly, the ship had a name from a completely dead language, one that had vanished from galactic records over 1,000 years ago. Her scanner beeped softly, confirming what Aegis had just announced. Deep within the ship, nearly 3,000 life forms were beginning to stir from some kind of suspended animation. Heart rates were slowly increasing, brain activity was returning to normal levels, and body temperatures were rising from near freezing to normal ranges. "Team leader to all units," Hannah whispered into her communicator, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "We're not just looking at ancient technology here. We're about to meet the people who built it, and they've been asleep for over a millennium." "Captain," Minho felt like he was drowning as consciousness slowly returned to his body. The quantum pod around him hissed open, releasing a cloud of strange-smelling vapor that made his lungs burn. His muscles felt like they were made of lead, and every joint in his body screamed in protest as he tried to sit up. The last thing he remembered was lying down for what should have been a routine jump through hyperspace. Now everything felt wrong. All around him, similar pods were opening with mechanical precision. His crew members stumbled out one by one, their faces pale and confused. Some were coughing violently, others were trying to stand on legs that wouldn't support their weight. The medical bay echoed with groans and whispered questions as nearly 3,000 people slowly returned to the world of the living. "What happened to us?" whispered Chief Engineer Hyun, her voice barely audible as she leaned against her pod for support. Her hands were shaking as she tried to check her watch, but the display showed only error messages. Captain Minho forced himself to stand, fighting against the waves of dizziness that threatened to knock him back down. His throat felt like sandpaper, and when he tried to speak, only a rough whisper came out. He cleared his throat several times before he could manage his first command in what felt like forever. "Aegis report," he managed to croak, his voice echoing strangely in the large medical bay. The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately, its calm voice a stark contrast to the confusion and fear filling the room. "Captain, temporal displacement detected and confirmed. Subjective time experienced during quantum lock, 7 months, 14 days. Actual elapsed time in normal space, 1,043 years, 2 months, 16 days. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Several crew members gasped, others sat down hard on the floor, and a few began crying softly. Minho felt the blood drain from his face as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Over 1,000 years, everyone they had ever known, everyone they had ever loved, was long dead and buried. Lieutenant Somin was the first to recover enough to speak, though her voice was shaking. "Sir, what about Earth? What about the war we were fighting? Did we win?" The question that everyone was thinking but afraid to ask hung in the air like poison. They had been humanity's most advanced warship, sent on a critical mission to secure an ancient weapon that could turn the tide of a desperate war. Earth had been under siege, colonies were falling one by one, and their success or failure could have determined the fate of their entire species. Aegis took a moment longer to respond this time, and somehow that pause made everything worse. "Unknown. Captain, Long-range communications remain severed. Last received transmission, sent 1,043 years ago, indicated critical defense failure at Lunar Station. No further contact with Earth Command has been established. The silence that followed was so complete that Minho could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Lunar Station had been humanity's last major defensive position in the solar system. If it had fallen, then Earth itself would have been defenseless. He closed his eyes and tried to process what this meant, but his mind kept rejecting the horrible possibility. They might be the last humans alive in the entire universe. Admiral Kethvar had seen a lot of advanced technology in his 50 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for what he was looking at now. The data streaming across his screens made no sense, according to everything he knew about how the universe worked. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked again, hoping the numbers would somehow become less terrifying. They didn't. The human ship wasn't just big or well-armed. It was something else entirely. Every scan they ran revealed new impossibilities that made his scientific team question their own instruments. The vessel seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, flickering in and out of their reality like a ghost that couldn't decide whether to be alive or dead. Chief Scientist Yura stood beside him, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like fear. She had spent her entire career studying the most advanced technologies in the galaxy, but now she was staring at readouts that challenged everything she thought she knew about physics. "Admiral, their quantum drive isn't just for travel," she explained, her voice unusually quiet. "It's integrated into every system on the ship. They can make parts of their vessel exist outside normal space while keeping other parts in our reality. It's like they've learned to control the fundamental forces that hold the universe together." Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine. "Explain it to me like I'm a child, Yura. What exactly are we dealing with here?" Yura pulled up a three-dimensional display of the human ship, highlighting different sections in various colors. "See these weapon systems? They're not just mounted on the hull. They're quantum-linked to the ship's core. When they want to fire, they can phase the weapons into our reality for just long enough to attack, then shift them back out of normal space where nothing can touch them." The implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. "So they can shoot at us, but we can't shoot back." "It gets worse," Yura continued, her fingers dancing across the control panel to show new data. "Their shields aren't energy barriers like ours. They're quantum fields that can selectively choose what exists and what doesn't. A missile fired at them might simply cease to exist the moment it touches their defensive field, or it might be redirected into a parallel dimension where it can't hurt anyone." Kethvar stared at the technical specifications, trying to understand how such technology was even possible. The power requirements alone should have been impossible to meet, but somehow the humans had figured it out. Their ship was like a weapon that existed partially outside the rules that governed everything else in the universe. "But surely there are limits," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "They can't just rewrite reality whenever they want." Yura highlighted another section of data, and her expression grew even more troubled. "Admiral, according to these readings, when they choose to fully phase back into normal space, they don't just interact with our reality, they can change it. Local gravity, the speed of light, even time itself can be altered in the space around their ship." The Admiral felt his legs grow weak. They weren't dealing with advanced aliens or even a superior military force. They had stumbled across something that could fundamentally alter the laws of physics in the space around it. The humans weren't just technologically superior. They had somehow learned to become gods of their own small piece of the universe. "Send a message to the Council immediately," he ordered, his voice barely steady. "Tell them we haven't found refugees. We've awakened something that could reshape galactic civilization, and we have no idea what they plan to do with that power." Captain Minho stood in the center of the council chamber, surrounded by representatives from dozens of alien species. The room was massive, designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. But Minho didn't feel small. He felt hollow, like someone had reached inside his chest and torn out everything that mattered to him. The news had been delivered with the cold efficiency that diplomats were famous for. Earth was gone. Not destroyed in some glorious final battle, but simply forgotten. The aliens spoke of humanity in past tense, as if his people were already museum pieces rather than living beings standing right in front of them. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Minho said, his voice deadly quiet. Every word was carefully controlled, but those who knew him could hear the rage building underneath. "You're telling me that humanity is extinct, that our homeworld is now some kind of tourist attraction, where aliens come to look at the ruins of our civilization?" Admiral Kethver shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The alien had seen the technical specifications of the human ship, and he was clearly nervous about how this conversation might go. "Captain, we understand this is difficult news. Earth is preserved as a memorial to honor your species' achievements. The Council is prepared to offer sanctuary to you and your crew. We have colony worlds where you could—" "No." The single word cut through the chamber like a knife through silk. Minho's expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture made every alien in the room suddenly remember that they were dealing with a predator species. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Aegis," Minho called out, his voice carrying clearly through the communication link to his ship. "Demonstrate defensive capability. Level 1. What happened next lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. The Day One's quantum field pulsed once, sending ripples through space-time that were visible to the naked eye. The three massive Council dreadnoughts that had been positioned around the human ship in what they called a defensive formation simply stopped. Not stopped moving. Stopped existing in normal time. Inside those ships, terrified crews found themselves trapped in bubbles of slowed time. They could see their own hands moving through the air like they were swimming through thick honey. Their thoughts became sluggish. As seconds stretched into minutes, they watched in horror as their own heartbeats became visible on their medical monitors, each beat taking nearly a full minute to complete. The aliens in the Council chamber stared at their screens in disbelief. Their most powerful warships, vessels that could crack planets in half, had been rendered completely helpless without a single shot being fired. The human ship hadn't even powered up its weapons. It had simply decided that the laws of physics worked differently around those three ships. "We are not refugees," Minho announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "We are not victims seeking your charity. We are the last guardians of human space, and we will act accordingly." He turned slowly, making eye contact with representatives from every major power in the galaxy. When he spoke again, his voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Earth may be gone, but humanity is not extinct. Not while we still draw breath, not while our ship still flies, and certainly not while we still have the power to protect what is ours." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The question you need to ask yourselves is simple. Do you want us as allies, or do you want to find out what humans are truly capable of when we have nothing left to lose?" Dr. Hana's hands trembled as she scrolled through files that hadn't been accessed in centuries. The Council's deepest archives contained legends that most people dismissed as fairy tales, stories told to children about ancient gods who once ruled the stars. But now, staring at her screen in the dim light of the research chamber, those fairy tales were starting to look terrifyingly real. The tactical patterns were identical. Every human military strategy, every formation they used, every principle of their warfare matched perfectly with the ancient legends of the Builders. The mythical race that supposedly created most of the galaxy's star lanes built the massive stations that still functioned after millions of years, and then vanished, without leaving so much as a goodbye message. "This can't be coincidence," she whispered to herself, pulling up comparison charts that made her stomach turn. The fighting style that Captain Minho's crew used, the way they organized their ship, even the symbols carved into their hull, all matched descriptions from stories that were older than recorded history. She rushed to the next scheduled meeting with the human captain, her research files clutched against her chest like a shield. The conference room felt different now, charged with an energy that made her skin crawl. When she looked at Minho, she no longer saw a refugee from a dead civilization. She saw something far more dangerous. "Captain," she began, her voice catching. "Slightly, our records speak of an ancient civilization called the Builders. The time frame of their disappearance matches exactly with humanity's supposed extinction period. The similarities in your technology, your tactics, even your ship design are too perfect to ignore. Minho didn't look surprised. Instead, he exchanged a meaningful glance with Lieutenant Juna, his second-in-command. There was something in that look that made Dr. Hana realize she had stumbled onto a secret that was bigger than she had imagined. "Doctor," Minho said slowly, "what do you know about exile?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not sure I understand." "Humanity didn't originate on Earth," Minho continued, his voice taking on a tone that was both sad and proud. "Earth was our prison, not our birthplace. We were exiles, banished to a small blue world at the edge of nowhere, forced to forget who we really were and where we came from." Lieutenant Juna leaned forward, adding to her captain's words. "For thousands of years, we lived as primitives, fighting with sticks and stones, while our true heritage lay buried in our genetic memory. We built civilizations, destroyed them, built them again, always feeling like something was missing but never knowing what." Dr. Hana felt the room spinning around her. "You're saying humans are the builders?" "We're saying humans are the builders," Minho corrected. "The quantum drive, our weapon systems, our ability to manipulate space-time itself, none of this is new technology. It's our birthright, our inheritance that we finally remembered when the final war pushed us to our breaking point." The implications hit her like a physical blow. The galaxy's greatest mystery, the ancient race that had shaped civilization itself, hadn't vanished into cosmic dust. They had been exiled, their memories wiped, sent to live as primitives on a forgotten world, until some cosmic trigger brought their true nature flooding back. "The legends say the builders could reshape reality with their thoughts," Dr. Hana whispered. "The legends," Lieutenant Juna said with a cold smile, "don't do us justice." News of this revelation spread through the galactic communication networks like wildfire. Humanity hadn't been a young species that got lucky with advanced technology. They were the galaxy's former masters, and they had just woken up from a very long sleep. The hegemony had never been known for their patience or their intelligence. When news spread across the galaxy that a single human ship possessed technology, beyond anything ever seen, their response was predictably brutal and simple. They wanted that technology for themselves, and they were prepared to take it by force. Admiral Corex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as 50,000 warships moved into perfect formation around him. The sight should have filled him with pride. 12 of the galaxy's most aggressive species had put aside their differences to work together, something that hadn't happened in over 2 centuries. Klingon-style battle cruisers flew alongside sleek Vorthan destroyers, while massive hegemony dreadnoughts anchored the formation with their planet-cracking firepower. "Send the message," Corex commanded, his voice filled with the confidence that came from commanding the largest warfleet in galactic history. "Tell the humans they have 1 hour to surrender their ship and technology. After that, we take what we want from their wreckage." The transmission went out on all frequencies, broadcasted across the galaxy, so that every civilization would know what happened to those who possessed power without the strength to keep it. The message was simple and brutal. Surrender now or be destroyed. Captain Minho received the ultimatum while standing on the bridge of the Daewon, surrounded by his crew of 3,000 souls. They were the last humans in the universe, facing an enemy that outnumbered them nearly 17,000 to 1. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on every person aboard the ship like a physical thing. "Sir," Lieutenant Somin reported. From her station, "We're detecting massive energy buildups across their entire fleet. They're not planning to take prisoners." Minho nodded slowly, his expression calm despite the impossible odds they faced. His crew had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, running drills and calibrating systems that hadn't been used in over 1,000 years. They all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle for their lives. This was humanity's final stand. "They want to see what we're capable of," Minho said quietly, his voice carrying to every station on the bridge. "Then we'll show them exactly why the galaxy forgot us by choice, not by conquest." He turned to his weapons officer, a young woman whose hands were steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Lieutenant Juna, bring all quantum systems online. Full power to the displacement matrix." "Aye, Captain, all systems green and standing by." The Daewon began to change, The ship's hull shimmered as quantum fields activated across its entire surface. Reality seemed to bend around the vessel as it prepared to fully phase back into normal space-time. The air on the bridge crackled with energy that made everyone's hair stand on end. "Phase transition in 10 seconds, Aegis announced, its calm voice a stark contrast to the tension filling every corridor of the ship. The hegemony fleet spread out across thousands of kilometers of space, their weapons charging, and their crews preparing for what they expected to be a quick and easy victory. They had no idea that they were about to witness something that would be remembered for the rest of galactic history. The Daewon completed its phase transition, appearing above the enemy fleet like a dark star against the void. Its quantum signature burned so brightly that it could be detected from 3 star systems away, announcing to the universe that humanity's true children had finally come home. The silence before the battle was broken only by the hum of 50,000 ships charging their weapons. Admiral Corex watched his tactical display with satisfaction as his massive fleet spread across space like a steel net, ready to crush the single human vessel that dared to defy them. His finger hovered over the firing command, waiting for the perfect moment to demonstrate the hegemony's overwhelming power. That moment never came. What happened next lasted exactly 4.7 seconds, though to those who witnessed it, time seemed to stretch into eternity. The Daewon didn't move. It didn't fire a single weapon. It didn't even power up its defensive systems. Instead, reality itself began to change around the human ship. The first row of hegemony warships simply vanished. Not destroyed, not blown apart, not even damaged. They ceased to exist, as if someone had reached into the universe and deleted them from reality. One moment they were there, bristling with weapons and filled with confident warriors. The next moment, there was only empty space where proud vessels had been flying just heartbeats before. Admiral Corex stared at his screen in disbelief as hundreds of green dots representing his ships began disappearing from his tactical display. "What's happening? Report!" he screamed into his communicator, but the responses he got back made no sense. The second wave of ships found themselves trapped in something far worse than destruction. Time itself began to loop around them, trapping their crews in recursive nightmares. The same second of terror played over and over again, as their ships tried to fire weapons that would never discharge, as their crews experienced the moment of realizing they were about to die, again and again and again. With no escape and no end in sight, Captain Briex of the destroyer Vengeance felt his mind breaking as he watched his own hand reach for the emergency beacon for the 1,000th time, knowing that he would never quite reach it before the loop reset. His crew's screams echoed endlessly through the corridors, the same screams at the same pitch forever. The third group of ships faced perhaps the strangest fate of all. They were translated into parallel dimensions, existing in spaces that were almost like normal reality, but not quite. Their crews could see their home dimension through what looked like windows, could even communicate through quantum frequencies, but they could never return. They became ghosts, able to watch the universe they knew but never again able to touch it. Admiral Corex felt his sanity slipping as he tried to understand what he was seeing. His fleet of 50,000 ships, the most powerful military force ever assembled, was being destroyed by something that didn't even qualify as combat. The humans weren't fighting them. They were simply deciding that the hegemony fleet shouldn't exist anymore. With trembling hands, he managed to activate his emergency communicator one last time. "Command," he whispered, his voice broken by terror. "They're not warriors. They're not even soldiers. They're forces of nature themselves." Before he could say anything else, time stopped around his flagship. He found himself frozen in place, his mouth open mid-word, his eyes wide with horror. His crew became living statues, trapped forever in the moment of their defeat, aware but unable to move or speak or even blink. Lieutenant Somin monitored the destruction from her station aboard the Daewon, her face pale as she watched the tactical display. "Sir," she reported, her voice barely steady, "we're receiving surrender signals from everyone. Every ship, every station, every colony in a 12-sector radius is broadcasting immediate and unconditional surrender." Captain Minho nodded slowly, feeling no satisfaction in the victory. Fear, he realized, had just become humanity's most effective diplomat. They had demonstrated that they didn't need to conquer the galaxy through traditional warfare. They could simply decide that their enemies shouldn't exist, and reality would obey. The news of what happened to the hegemony fleet spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within minutes of the battle's end, every communication network was buzzing with reports that seemed too impossible to believe. 50,000 ships had been erased from existence in less than 5 seconds by a single human vessel that hadn't even fired a shot. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had never surrendered to anyone in their entire history sent messages of complete and unconditional submission before they were even asked. The proud Altarian Empire, which had conquered dozens of worlds, broadcast their surrender on every frequency they could access. The warrior clans of Zerion, who considered dying in battle the highest honor, threw down their weapons and begged for mercy from an enemy they had never even met. Within 6 hours, 17 different species had formally surrendered to humanity. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The humans hadn't demanded surrender, hadn't even threatened these civilizations. But the message was clear. Resistance was not just futile, it was impossible. The Galactic Council held an emergency session that lasted all of 20 minutes. The vote to dissolve their 1,000-year-old government was unanimous. In its place, they established the Human Protectorate Administration, essentially handing over control of galactic civilization to a species that most of them had thought was extinct just days earlier. Captain Minho found himself promoted to Fleet Admiral without ceremony or celebration. The title was simply announced across all official channels, as if the galaxy had collectively decided that arguing with the humans about anything was too dangerous to attempt. He accepted the responsibility with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout the crisis. His first act as Fleet Admiral was to establish what became known as the Minho Doctrine, a set of rules so simple that even the most primitive civilizations could understand them. Peace would be maintained through 2 promises: complete protection for any species that chose to live peacefully, and complete annihilation for any species that chose aggression. The Day One became a legend before its crew had even finished writing their reports about the battle. Parents across 1,000 different worlds began using the ship's name to quiet misbehaving children. "Be good, or the Day One will come for you," became a common threat that worked frighteningly well. Military academies studied the engagement obsessively, though they could never quite understand how the humans had done what they did. Generals who had spent their entire careers studying warfare began having nightmares about quantum fire and disappearing fleets. Some retired immediately, rather than face the possibility of ever opposing humanity in battle. Others simply went insane, trying to develop strategies against an enemy that could rewrite the laws of physics. Standing alone on the observation deck of his ship, Fleet Admiral Minho looked out at the stars that stretched endlessly in every direction. These were the same stars his ancestors had ruled millions of years ago, before their exile, before their long sleep on a forgotten world called Earth. The view was beautiful and terrible at the same time. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had left Earth as refugees from a lost war, sleeping in quantum stasis while their homeworld burned. They had awakened to find themselves alone in the universe, the last remnants of a species that the galaxy had already forgotten. But now they were home. Not on any particular planet or in any specific system, but everywhere their ships could reach. The galaxy itself had become humanity's domain, not through conquest or colonization, but through the simple recognition that they had always belonged here. In the quantum-locked depths of space, Earth's children had finally come home to rule.